I'm Mike Smith. I'm visiting from Charleston, and I'm here to welcome you all to Congressman Tim Scott's third First in the South presidential town hall featuring Texas Governor Rick Perry. I'm sure I don't need to do this, but as a friendly reminder, please adjust the settings on your cell phones. We'd hate to interrupt our featured speakers this morning. Now, before we get started, please join me in thanking our co-sponsors. Tim Scott, of course, has a lot of friends, so this list is fairly long. They include the Berkeley County Republican Party, Beaufort County GOP, Carolina Forest GOP, Carolina Patriots, Charleston Republican Party, Charleston Tea Party. I'm sensing a theme here. Dorchester County Republican Party, Georgetown County Republican Party, Georgetown Patriots, Goose Creek 912, Somerville 912, Horry County Republican Party, Northern Horry County Republican Party, Mount Pleasant 912, Myrtle Beach Tea Party, North Myrtle Beach GOP, South Strand GOP, and the Waccamaw Neck GOP. I would also like to thank the Horry County Sheriff's Office for your professionalism and for your assistance this morning. We also, of course, wish to thank Horry Georgetown Technical College for hosting us here again this morning. We greatly appreciate your hospitality. As you all know, our great Senator Jim DeMint is hosting a terrific forum called the American Principles Project, Palmetto Freedom Forum, today in Columbia. We want to honor his program by being there on time. To that end, the congressman will need to leave immediately following the town hall, so we regret that they will not be able to speak with all of you one-on-one after the event. Thank you for your understanding, and if you are traveling to Columbia, please travel there safely today. Also want to acknowledge Alan Clemens and any of our other elected officials here with us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my privilege to welcome Reverend Carl Harris, retired pastor of the First Methodist Church in Conway, who has kindly offered to lead us in the opening prayer. Reverend Harris.
Father, we thank you so much for this gathering today. We realize that our country is drifting in the wrong direction. We pray that you would help us in all the endeavors that we undertake to move back toward being a true democracy and a republic. We pray for these men who are coming today to speak to us and who are offering themselves, especially for Governor Perry, who's offering himself as a candidate for the presidency of this nation. We pray for him that you'd give him your determination within his heart to do what's right, to say what's right and to do what's right, to be a wonderful candidate, and finally on down months and months from now to perhaps be the man that leads this nation. We thank you, dear God, for every blessing, and the blessing of discernment is the one blessing that we need so much today. There is so much talk about compromise. But dear God, I pray that you'll just help these men not to compromise, but to stand by principles and by facts and by truth and by your word. And then we can move this nation from moving towards socialism back toward democracy. We thank you for the blessing that you give to us. We know that the end product is what's always important. And we just pray that after all this is over, the freedom we have in this country of electing our officials, after all this is over, that someone will be in the White House that we can be so proud of, and someone that will lead us, and someone that will be there to make the decisions that need to be made to move this country in the right direction. Thank you for your guidance. And we realize that nations come and nations go, but you're always the same. Would you bless us and help us to honor you with faith in you and love for you and love for your people. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Reverend. It is now my privilege to introduce to you retired United States Air Force Master Sergeant and VFW Legislative Director Lynn Demery, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Would everyone please rise and join me in pledge allegiance to the flag of our country? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant. And now, please give a warm welcome to Congressman Tim Scott and our very special guest, Republican candidate for the presidency of the United States of America, Governor Rick Perry.
Well, good morning. We can't hear you. Good morning. One more time. That's a great South Carolina welcome. Please take your seats if you can. Welcome to one of the most amazing experiences in all of your lives, a chance to hear from a Texas boy in the middle of South Carolina. Now, this is an important week in our country's history. We have a president who's going to give a speech about creating jobs. Now, he's lost 2.5 million jobs since he's been president, but he's going to give a speech about creating jobs. But we have with us today a true job creator. Now, since the governor took the office of governor in Texas, he's created more than 1.2 million jobs. And since 2009, he has created half of all the jobs in America in one state. We have a man who understands public service because he's been the governor, but more importantly, because he has served in the Air Force, he understands our national interest. I know two things for sure. The less I speak, the more he speaks, and the happier y'all are. So y'all are my bosses, so I'm going to shut up and give the mic to one of our candidates and perhaps the next president of the United States. Rick Perry.
Tim, thank you very much. I'm going to have a seat just a second, and thank you for doing this. More importantly, thank you for bringing your mama. Scott, thank you for being here. Meyer, thank you for coming along. I want to say this one thing before I get started, because I want to share with you all just a little bit about who I am, where I came from, and kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. But one thing I want to say is I'm so proud to be the governor of a state that truly understands the importance of job creation. I mean, we got to get America back working again. And what government's role is to create an environment. I didn't create those jobs. Americans created those jobs. Texans created those jobs because we allowed them to have an environment where they weren't overtaxed, overregulated, overlitigated. And then we got out of the way and let the private sector do what the private sector does best, which is create jobs. And I learned that in a little place called Paint Creek, Texas. If you got a Texas road map, it'll be on there. If you don't, it won't be. One of the things I did as the governor of Texas, I called the Department of Transportation. I said, I want you to put Paint Creek, Texas on the road map. It's about 200 miles west of Dallas-Fort Worth and 60 miles north of Abilene. My father refers to it as the Big Empty. And we're fifth generation out there, tenant farmers. I grew up on a dryland cotton farm. I grew up in a house that didn't have indoor plumbing. I know I'm I'm an old guy. But that's just the way it was out there in those days. And my mom and dad were great and good and wonderful. And we weren't rich, Miss Scott, I'll promise you that, in material things. But we were rich in faith and in family. And that's my foundation. And I understand hard work and getting up every day. And my dad early on had a couple of jobs and settled into farming out there. And Paint Creek was a wonderful little place. It was a school, about 110 kids or so, grades 1 through 12. And on a farm to market road, and across that farm to market road, there was a Baptist church and a Methodist church. Your choice. and my life rotated around school, church, and Boy Scouts. That was my life, and it was a good one. So, and then I went off to school to be a veterinarian to the beloved Texas A&M. On their way to the SEC, I might add. Get ready. And I tell my friends, organic chemistry made a pilot out of me. So I had a little shift in my college life over to the Vietnam War was still going on, and so I volunteered to serve in the United States Air Force and finished up school and headed to Big Spring, Texas for my pilot training, and I spent the next about 4.5 years flying around the world, and TAC airlifter, flew all over the European, South America, Middle Eastern part of the world. Lived in Saudi Arabia in 1975 and was seeing that country start to make its transition from a very tribal Bedouin Indian lifestyle to a country with asphalt roads, and watching the Saudis learn to drive was an interesting experience. So, but during that period of time, and this is where I want to kind of wrap it up and pitch this back to you, is I went through a maturing process. And you know, one of the great things about my life, I've been growing almost every day. But I went through a maturing process. I never left the United States, and I got out of Texas very few times as a boy growing up. And, in 1964, went to Valley Forge, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City for the World's Fair, for the National Scout Jamboree. But other than that, I really didn't get exposed to much, and particularly about the world. But as a young man and flying into various and sundry countries, and I started making the connection between how people lived and the type of government that they had. You know, we went into monarchies and theocracies and other types of governments, dictatorships, and I made that very powerful reflection to me about what a great country we live in and the freedoms that we have and how precious they are, and that people would give their lives in a lot of cases to be able to have the freedoms that we have. And over the course of the last century, we've seen those freedoms chipped away time and time again. Those of you that have read my book, Fed Up, I talk about the loss of those freedoms, and you know, starting with that income tax that Tim's gonna fix. Working on it.
That's right.
And but anyway, he's got a great piece of legislation that I think does get us to where we need to go as a country, where everyone can be participating in this process of this great country. But anyway, that had a powerful effect on me, and I came back home, went back to the farm, and then in the mid 80s, I love public service. My father was a county commissioner. I've been trained and taught all of my life that public service is an honorable thing, whether it's wearing the uniform of our country, or whether it's serving like Tim does in Congress, or whether it's my great privilege to be the governor of a state. And so I truly believe that good men and women, it's one of the reasons I share with young people to find that place you're passionate about. You may join the Peace Corps or you may join the Marine Corps, but find that way to give back to this country. It's what makes America unique. So with that, let me just say I've lived the American dream. From leaving a small farm out in Paint Creek, Texas, to be the governor of a great state that has created all of these jobs that Tim shared with you, and has been a real catalyst. And one of the things I've enjoyed is challenging other governors to lower their taxes, to have a regulatory climate that's fair and predictable. We passed the most sweeping tort reform in the nation in 2003, and then this last year we passed loser pay. So I think we have, I've got a record that I'm really proud of, whether it was serving my country in the Air Force, whether it was coming back and being a small businessman for those 13 years, or then going back into public service in a different role, but again, making a difference. And the track record that we have created in Texas, I'll put up against anybody running for the President of the United States, but particularly the current resident of the White House. Anyway, thank you all for coming out. Let's open it up to some questions and have some fun this morning.
This is how we're going to do this, by the way. We have had an opportunity to ask questions online for the last several days. In addition to that, we've asked you to fill out a question form when you walked in the door. So my guy down here, Nick, has put them all in a little bowl, and he's been picking up the questions. And so we've just picked them out of the bowl. I'm going to start first with a...
We're going to be here a while.
You know,
that's a bowl full of questions.
We unfortunately have about 35 minutes per question.
All right, we'll roll.
We won't be here that long.
I will not filibuster.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Now, let's give him a hand.
If I wanted to filibuster, I would join the United States Senate.
I'll tell you what. I like that. They haven't passed a budget.
By the way, y'all got a great.
Like that.
Anyway, yes, sir.
All right. The first question comes from our Facebook audience. Terry Hoy submitted this. Is Terry here? I will read her question to you, sir. Governor, as president, how would you deal with regulations by the EPA, the NLRB?
That would almost get me on my feet. Yeah, one of the things, there are 4 guiding principles that I have every day. I get up, and these are how we govern in Texas. And the fact is, if it'll work in Texas, which is about the 13th largest economy in the world, it'll work in the United States, and they'll work for the federal government. Number 1 guiding principle is don't spend all the money. I mean, just think about it. I mean, we are spending money we don't have on programs, frankly, we don't want. Second guiding principle is to have as light an impact tax-wise on the job creators as you can, still delivering the services that the people want. Have a regulatory climate that is fair and predictable, and a legal system that doesn't allow for oversuing. So this regulatory, I will suggest that the regulatory burden that's been created by Washington, D.C. is the most costly part of what government is in America today. And you think about the EPA in particular. For instance, they came into Texas to take over our air permitting process, one that we've cleaned up our air in Texas as much as any other state, a rate of decrease of real pollutants, nitrous oxide, for instance, other emissions like ozone, more than any other state in the nation, yet the EPA wants to come in and take that over. Our calculations just for Texas is that their operating the clean air program would destroy 360,000 jobs just in Texas. So we lowered these real emissions. We've done a good job with that at the same time that we created more jobs than any other state in the nation. When the EPA contacted us that they wanted to come visit about Texas and our air permitting process, I looked at those two things and I thought, maybe they're going to give us an award. Isn't that the goal? Lower the emissions, clean up the air. Clean up the air for our kids. It's our kids that are breathing this air. It's our people. And create jobs. That ought to be the goal. And we've done that in Texas, and that's what I'd like to see done across America. I'll tell you one thing. The EPA director and the individuals that we have the opportunity to put into place, they are going to be pro-business administrators. And there's not going to be any apologies to anybody about it. Those agencies won't know what hit them. I think is one way to put it, is that we're no longer going to do business as usual. And those are direct appointees. Things like the NLRB that's coming into South Carolina and telling you that you can't have Boeing, I can promise you one thing, the appointees to that board will be pro-business.
Thank you, Governor. The next question comes from Pat Milley. Is Pat here? Thank you, Pat, for your question. Pat's question is, what will your policy be towards Israel?
Pat, thank you. Our friends, places where the United States interests are important, they will never have to ask where the United States will be under a Perry presidency. And whatever those countries may be. But in particularly, the oldest democracy in the Middle East, a country that we have probably one of the closest relationships with in the world. What our current president did relative to the 1967 border issue, to basically throw Israel under the bus, to to basically say, Israel, you need to go back to the 1967 borders, was unconscionable in my opinion. Israel will never have to wonder about whether or not we're going to be standing with them. Israel will never have to wonder if we get invaded by some enemy country or an opposition country. They will not have to worry about whether the United States is going to be standing with them. We will be there protecting not only their interest, but our interest in that country.
Is Jim Wharton here? Thank you for your question, Jim. Jim's question has to do with whether or not the whole notion of repatriation, bringing back American dollars from overseas. Over $2 trillion sit overseas because of double taxation. What would you do about that?
Well, obviously, lower that rate substantially. 0 is a pretty good rate. Because that money is going to come in and it's going to create jobs. And I think that's very important to send the message that, I mean, look, at 35% rate that it is today, that money's not coming back. So bring it back and make sure there's fairness in the way the taxes are calculated and what have you. I mean, if they've already paid their taxes, I'm for bringing that money back into the United States with 0 tax burden.
Excellent. I'm going through the questions, trying my best to make sure that we get as many questions asked as possible that are not duplicates. So if you see me going through the questions, we have a lot of questions on 2 topics. I guess when you write a book, they want to know the answers to the book. So the book Fed Up has brought up some questions here. One is on Social Security, and then another predominant question is on your position on immigration. So I'm going to put those together and let you have an opportunity to answer about half the questions.
On this, I'm going to talk about Social Security first. And I'm not going to ask for any hands out there for those that are either on Social Security or approaching it, like me. But no matter where you are in America, if you're already getting your Social Security benefits, if you are approaching that age of which you're going to get your Social Security, you've made a lot of decisions about retirement, about how you're going to take care of yourself and or your family. Those individuals need to understand something. you have no worries at all about your current Social Security as we go forward. What we do need to have a conversation about is kids my children's age. I got a 28-year-old son, or approaching 28, and a 25-year-old daughter, and we shouldn't lie to them and tell them that this system that we have in place today will be there for them. So have a conversation with America. How do we make that transition from the system that we've got today, that frankly, I call it a Ponzi scheme. I call it a monstrous lie for our kids, and it's true. And there's no use in, I mean, anyone who is running for the presidency of the United States and wants to keep status quo on entitlement is suspect. They don't want to be honest with the American people. And we have to have that conversation. So, you know, there's a lot of different options out there that we could talk about, you know, whether it's moving the age forward, you know, at some particular time. If it's, you know, if you're a 45-year-old or less, we're going to move that retirement age up to 69 or 70 or whatever it is. I mean, that's a good conversation to have. You know, there's part of the book where we talk about back in the early 80s, states had the opportunity with their public employees and their county employees to shift over to a private sector run program. And there were 3 counties in Texas did it. There's probably about 251 counties in Texas that wish they had done it in the early 80s. But having those types of thoughtful conversations, but with the clear and unmovable fact that if you're on Social Security today, or if you're approaching Social Security, you do not have to worry about those dollars going to be coming in for your retirement. Now, can I go on to immigration? The issue of immigration is a really broad one, and I'm going to try to be as brief as I can on this. The real issue here is you can't have a conversation about immigration reform until you first secure the border. It's a waste of time. I mean, there are those that want to have these intellectual discussions about immigration reform and this and that and the other, and that's fine. But I am not going to participate in a conversation that frankly doesn't matter. If you have a revolving door at the border with the United States and Mexico, immigration reform means nothing. So here's what needs to happen. And I've got a little bit more than just a passing understanding of this, because we've been dealing with it for the decade that I've been the governor. And since 2005, I believe is the correct year, we were requesting aviation assets to be used. Predator drones, unarmed predator drones, but with all the different technologies to look down through either the darkness or cloud cover or what have you, giving real-time information about activities along that border. I think strategic fencing has a very important role to play in the major metropolitan areas. I have said, and I'll say again in front of you all, I don't believe in building a wall from Brownsville, Texas to El Paso and then for the other 600 plus miles to Tijuana. Number one, it wouldn't be built in our children's lifetime. But there is a way to secure that border using strategic fencing in the metropolitan, or well, let's call it the metropolitan areas where the population numbers are high. But then there are miles and miles and miles of that border that is just open terrain. And the only way that you can truly secure that border is with boots on the ground. So here is the plan. It will take somewhere, we think, around 4,500 additional Border Patrol agents Texas to Tijuana, Brownsville to Tijuana, to protect that border with the boots on the ground. While we're waiting for that number of troops to be trained up, or those number of Border Patrol agents, I would have our National Guard on the border doing border security at this particular point in time. That is how you secure the border. Our border can truly be secured. But today there are parts of the Mexican and United States border that are in operational control of drug cartels. The idea that the President of the United States this spring would come to Texas, stand up in El Paso and proclaim that border to be safer than it's ever been is an outright lie. It is not. There have been 41,000 Mexicans who have lost their lives directly attributable to the drug cartels. We know it's spilling over into our states, bringing in poisons that are taking our children's lives, and the drug cartels are every bit as much terrorist as people that we are fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we got to treat them as such. So, look, you can secure that border. Once you get the border secured, then let's have the conversation about what immigration policies that we want to put into place. I think it's important for us that people that want to come and work legally, coming into this country, that we have a program in place to allow that to happen, but not until we secure that border, period.
Thank you. Those were probably the two most asked questions. And the third most asked questions is Jamie Ponce here. Jamie, as well as Doug, and about 12 other people want to know your position on the fair tax.
You wear it on your chest. It's a good thing. Tim's got, I think, a piece of legislation that's got amazing merit with a end position that is one that we support, moving this country, what we think 3 or 4 legislative sessions to move us from that, getting it lower, getting it fair, getting it simpler, en route to the fair tax. I don't know how to put it any plainer than that, but your guy has a plan that I think gets America to where it needs to get to.
Yes, sir. I like this guy. Anyways, that was a commercial break. Sponsored by We Love You.
Sponsored by your mama.
Don't be talking about my mama. Is Lynn Demery here? Lynn? Thank you for your service, sir.
Yes, sir.
We have a number of questions as well, Governor, about veteran issues. You want to take that as a broad topic?
Well, we were together in San Antonio this week, and as I had the privilege to speak in front of the VFW, I'm a proud member of Post 75 in Mineral Wells, Texas, of the American Legion. As an individual who volunteered to wear the uniform of my country, I think I have more than just a passing knowledge about what young men and women go through who serve. And then as the commander-in-chief over the last decade of 20,000 plus National Guard troops in Texas who have been deployed multiple times, as a governor who has signed way more letters to moms and wives and loved ones who have lost their lives in protection of our freedoms, I feel pretty qualified to talk about what we need to be doing, taking care of our veterans. Yeah, I'm a Vietnam era vet. And then I saw young men and women coming home in the late 60s and the early 70s who were ashamed to wear their uniform because our country didn't support that war. And they made the connection between the war and these young soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen. The great news is our country's really matured over the last 40 plus years, and they understand today what a privilege it is to have these sacrificial young men and women serving us. We've been at war for 10 years. I bet every one of you has been impacted by it, directly or indirectly, with loved ones. And we've seen them come home, and all too often they may be scarred on the outside, but a lot of times the scars we don't see. This post-traumatic stress syndrome from the multiple deployments that we see. And our VA, God bless them, and my dad's 86 years old, and he was an old B-17 tail gunner and flew 35 missions over Nazi-held Germany. And he gets his hearing aid, and he gets his eye specs, as he calls them, and his medicines. But there's a lot of things that our VA can't do. They have to travel hundreds of miles in some cases in some of our states. And I think we need to have a conversation with America about, are we doing everything that we can to take care of our veterans? Do we have the best care available to them? And I think the answer to that is no today. I don't think we're taking as good a care of our veterans as we could, nor as we should.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Is Jerry Runer and Bill Wayan? These gentlemen both have the same question, or similar question at least, sir. It asks, the question is, how strongly do you support a federal balanced budget and a federal balanced budget amendment?
I've signed 6 balanced budgets in Texas. I understand what that means. We will never, ever wean Washington, D.C. They'll never do it on their own. I mean, no offense, sir, but I mean, it's human nature to not want to say no. And all too often, that's what we're hearing in Washington, D.C., is people that are saying yes to special interest and what have you. The way to curtail the spending that's been going on in Washington, D.C. is to pass a balanced budget amendment. And I don't know if the scale is 1 being the least and 100 is the greatest. Show me at 100. I will do everything I can to go across this country to talk about why it's important for the states to pass a balanced budget amendment. I will personally make it an issue that I will go and campaign and, frankly, shame any member of Congress or the United States Senate that doesn't support it. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. I will join you in that fight. I can guarantee you that if you're our president. There's a question from John Clark, Bobby, Al, Janet, and Faye. And it all has to do with the fastest recovery for reemployment of Americans and Reaganomics and the whole theory of taxation.
Here's how you do it. And listen, I tell people, I said, you don't have to have a PhD in economics from Harvard to really understand how to get America back working again. And it's those 4 principles that I talked about earlier, sir, is you have to lower the tax burden on the job creators. You have a regulatory climate that is fair and predictable, a legal system that doesn't allow for oversuing, and then get out of the way. And what I mean by each of those is we talked about the moving towards the fair tax. That's on the legal side. Lower these rates. Lower these rates almost immediately. But let me tell you the bigger impact, and we talked about this already as well, is that you walk into agencies like the EPA and you call for an immediate stop of regulations that are going forward. You tell them we're going to... And one of the things that does, that sends the message to small businessmen and women. I want to share with you. Well, the energy industry in this country can create an incredible amount of jobs if it's freed from a burdensome EPA. The idea that the President of the United States went to Brazil and basically said, we want to be your best customer of your offshore oil, while he's stopping drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. And let me tell you, that's impacting blue-collar men and women who don't have a job today because of this president's regulatory burden. You got a Dodd-Frank bill that is keeping banks from being able to loan money to small businessmen and women. That needs to be repealed on its face. You free up Wall Street to Main Street from over-regulation, over-taxation. That's how you get America back working. This is easy. I mean, if this president wants to have a jobs speech this week, let me tell you what he needs to do. He needs to stand up and say, we're going to repeal Obamacare. We're going to repeal Dodd-Frank, and we're going to stop the EPA from going forward with any of these regulations they've got. And I'm going to send a message to the National Labor Relations Board to leave South Carolina alone. Leave Boeing alone. Let them create jobs in this country. That's how you do it. And it can happen in a hurry. I'm telling you, there are people that will go invest. I mean, that's what capitalism's all about. I mean, people want to be freed up from over-taxation, over-regulation, over-litigation. And if they know that they have a chance, an opportunity, not a guarantee, but an opportunity to risk their capital, and they got an opportunity to have a return on that, let me tell you, this country will explode. And we'll create jobs like we've never seen, and we can become independent from an energy standpoint, from countries that will do us harm if they're left to their own good. And we need to do that. We need to tell them and say, you know what, Mr. Chavez, we don't need your oil. Telling countries that'll do us harm, we don't need that anymore. We're producing it in America. Yeah.
Is Claire in the audience? Claire from Conway, Scavone? Claire, that was basically a good answer to your question on Obamacare.
Yeah. Here, you know, Obamacare is an interesting issue, and you know, Lord willing, the Supreme Court will find that individual mandate unconstitutional next year, and then, but I want to share you, day one, when I walk into the Oval Office, I will sign an executive order to wipe out as much of Obamacare as I can through an executive order. Day one.
Claire says that was a better answer. So thank you, Claire. Is Bob Loy with us? Bob, thank you for your question, sir. Bob's question has to do with the downsizing of the federal government and specifically the Department of Energy and Education.
Let me talk about education first, because there's nothing more important than his education. It is the most important thing that we do in this country, is making sure that our children have an opportunity to have access and can afford to get an education. That's very, very important. But it does not in any way need to be mandated or directed from Washington, D.C. The administrative overhead for the Department of Education is about $1 billion. I would suggest to you that $1 billion would be substantially better spent back in the States in the classroom. If you want to leave, if you want to leave the Education Department there for a while, to be a repository of best practices, I could get along with that, but you know, the fact of the matter is that they have not educated one child. Just like the Department of Energy has not created one bit of energy. So those are two great examples of agencies where I think you can make substantial contractions. It's kind of like that getting to the fair tax. It may take us 2 or 3 sessions to get there, but I think And the American people have to be for these things. I mean, that's what this election's really going to be about. It's do you believe that government has all the answers? Do you believe that we need to rely upon government for this country to be strong? Or do you really believe in the individual? Do you believe in individual freedoms? That's what this election's going to be about. Someone came to Austin, we were in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and they said, Governor, when I go back home and people are going to ask me about you, they don't know that much about you, you know. They know you go running with your little pistol and shoot coyotes if they try to get your daughter's dog, but they said they really don't know what's in your heart philosophically. So what can I tell them? I said, you tell them that Rick Perry is about freedom. Freedom from over-regulation, freedom from over-taxation, freedom from over-litigation. I'm about freedom. I believe in the American people. I believe if you all are given the opportunity to create jobs and wealth, because that's really, at the end of the day, I mean, you can't have a foreign policy without a strong economy. You can't have a future for this young lady here without having a strong economy. And that's to free up the entrepreneur, whether they're a big business or a small business in Gaffney, South Carolina. And I want to share with you, and excuse me I'm going to filibuster 1 second. We drove through Gaffney to pick up the state senator. It wasn't a stop on our bus tour. We were going from one of the larger cities to, and they said, well, we're just going to pull in here, pick him up. Just wave to the folks. You know, there may be a few people here. Yep, there were. There were over 100 people with homemade signs, and I bailed off the bus and went out there and started shaking hands. And there are two palpable emotions that I've seen across this country in the 3 weeks that I've been running. And one of them, Scott, is that there are people really excited. I mean, they're really excited that there's somebody they can get excited about that's got a vision, that's got a record, that's going to lead this country. And they're excited about that. And they get, you know, and Gaffney's not real big. And it was just like, man, we may get to meet the next president of the United States. And a lady was walking, and the other emotion is fear. They're afraid for their business. They're afraid for their children. They're afraid for their grandchildren. And this lady walked up to me, and she was emoting both of those emotions at once. It was a powerful moment for me in this campaign. And she came up and shook my hand vigorously. And she said, Governor, tell me something. Tell me something that will give me hope that I'm going to keep my small business open. And I said, ma'am, when I'm the President of the United States, the boot of overtaxation and overregulation will be off your throat. And she broke down and started crying. And that was a crystalline moment for me. That's why we do what we do, brother. Amen. Thank you.
Honestly, the next question is so easy I don't even want to ask it, but it does come up in the order. Robert Reynolds? Robert, simple question. Mr. Governor, are you for gun control? Or do you oppose?
I'm actually for gun control. Use both hands.
Sorry. That literally was the next question. Here's an important question as far as your candidacy from Ann Shields. Ann, thank you for your question. Simple question. Obama has a money machine. Will you be able to raise enough money to win this race?
Oh, I thought you were talking about monetary policy, where they were just... You know, I think there are enough Americans who love this country, who realize that this is we're at a real crossroads. I got the greatest job in the world being governor of Texas. I love it. I didn't want to, frankly, be in this presidential election. I think most of you know this story of me. My wife basically sat down with me one day back in late spring, early summer, and said, "Listen, I know you love your job. I know, you know, you're passively good at it." She said, "But our country's in trouble, and you do not have the privilege to sit on the sideline. You got to do your duty." And I think there are a lot of people in this country that understand that this country is on the precipice, and that we're gonna raise whatever we need to raise to be competitive. Now, you know, I got outspent in 2002 when I was running for governor 4-1. You know, do I have to raise as much money as he and George Soros can put together? I don't know. But what I do, I believe in this country, and I believe in the values that have gotten this country to the place to where it's freed more people, it's created more wealth. I mean, the great story of America is, I still believe in it, and I truly believe that there are people across the country who believe in it as much as I do, and they're willing to give their good names. They're willing to go work and give their time. They're willing to give their treasure to make sure that their children have at least the best or the same opportunities that they had, or even better. And so for that reason, I got great comfort that we'll raise the money we need to be competitive against this president.
We've had very few energy-specific questions, but Carolyn Freeman from Facebook, I'm not sure if she's here. Carolyn, hey, good morning, ma'am. Wanted to ask you a question about, would you increase the production of U.S. oil?
I'm an all-of-the-above energy guy. I mean, I believe that if you have a source of energy that is mature, now, I don't think government needs to pick winners and losers in the energy industry. And that's pretty much an across the board. But we have substantial deposits of energy in this country that we didn't even know we had 10 years ago. I mean, technology is how we've been able to both discover them and produce them. Hydraulic fracturing of these shale plays, for instance, monstrous amounts of natural gas that can fuel and frankly make America substantially more independent on the energy side, at the same time creating huge numbers of jobs. So the idea that we would have policies in place, I mean, when you've got the SEC, now I'm not talking about the football conference here either, I'm kind of, you know, when you've got the Securities Exchange Commission asking questions about companies, are you involved in hydraulic or investing in companies that have hydraulic fracturing? I mean, the message is clear there to the oil and gas companies that we're coming after you on this. And there is absolutely no evidence, no scientific basis, in fact, that any underground water has ever been impacted negatively by hydraulic fracturing. It is a technique that we need to protect. It's a technique that we need to be putting in place, because it is the reason and the way that we will be as independent and job creating as we can be in the energy side of things. I'm for building nuclear plants, obviously building them in places where they don't have phenomena like earthquakes and what have you. And, our prayers go up for the people in Japan for what they went through, but we don't have tsunamis in Texas. So wisely building out these plants, biofuels. I mean, there's a substantial, where wind energy is mature, but again, I'm for removing all these subsidies from. My instinct is this: if we will remove the burden of regulation away from these industries that are energy producing, they won't need any subsidies. I'll take a second. I said something about lifting up prayers for people in Japan, and I'm leaving here as soon as I get through. I had a couple more events in South Carolina I was scheduled to do, but I'm leaving directly from here, going back to Texas. Our state has got wildfires that are running quite wild and zero containment right now, and the winds are supposed to pick up again. So just keep those folks in your prayers, if you will, as we go back and try to get people out of harm's way and get our state, pray for rain as well. So anyway.
All right, so we have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to ask you 2 or 3 questions, so we'll go rapid fire on the next one.
Yes. No.
Mary Daly? That's a good question. Is Mary Daly wants to ask this question here, and will you be willing to help get term limits on members of Congress?
Yeah. Here, I am not a fan of term limits. Let me tell you why. And why would you limit him? No, I'm serious. Why would you limit a man that is doing your work? And I get it. There are some up there that are not. But the fact is, you're what term limits ought to be about. And if the American people aren't paying attention and engaged, and they let people who are spending too much money or not representing them, they need to get rid of them. Because here, let me share with you why, because I'm really passionate about this. If let's say we limit congressmen to 3 terms, 6 years, and that's it. Well, but here, do you know what happens at that particular point in time? You just embolden and empower the bureaucrats, and the bureaucrats don't have term limits yet. Yeah. So my point is, I think that we have to be engaged as people. We did not spend enough time making sure that people, when they didn't support us, I will tell you what's a heck of a lot more important than passing term limits is a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution.
Final 2 questions. One will come from the young man, Peter Goff.
Hey, Peter.
And the other one will come from my brother from another mother, Brian Moniz. Peter's question is about troops in Iraq. And Peter's over here too, right?
Oh.
Peter first.
Young Peter. How are you, Peter?
Troops in Iraq.
What about them?
What do you think? Keep them or not?
Oh, okay, I understand the question. We need to be talking to our battlefield commanders and have clear understanding what our mission is. We should never send young men and women from this country into any conflict when we do not have our national interest in mind and have a clear exit strategy. We've been at war for 10 years. We are grinding up a generation of young soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen. I want to bring our troops home as soon as we can. But I don't want to signal to our enemies when that will happen. I think the President of the United States basically saying we're going to draw down our troops at a particular date was absolutely devastating to morale and to the safety of our men and women in uniform. So, Peter, not just in Afghanistan, but in Iraq, we need to bring home our troops as soon as we can, but still making sure that our interests are being served.
Brian's question is simply, as the governor of Texas, what is it in your record that makes you the best qualified candidate to be president of the United States? And Brian is a business owner and wants to know about the economy.
Great.
Again.
There's not anybody that's going to be standing on the stage, whether it's in California this week or through our Republican primary. And listen, they're all very good men and women. I greatly appreciate their throwing their hat in the ring and loving their country. Or if it's this or next fall with the President of the United States, current president, there is no one going to be sitting on that stage who has the record of job creation that I have. There's going to be some that get up and say, well, I've created jobs, and that's true. There's, one in particular that's created jobs all over the world. But while he was the governor of Massachusetts, he didn't create very many jobs. But the fact is, we have a track record, and it's working in that. I believe in the American people, and what we've done in Texas to free our entrepreneurs, our small businessmen and women from over-taxation, over-regulation, and over litigation is nobody can. You cannot, unless you're just a pure political hack or work for the New York Times. Sorry, I just took my one gratuitous slap. You cannot argue that we haven't created the best business climate, and certainly in the big states, and that's what needs to happen in America. You have to know how to deal with these agencies. You have to be committed to that. We cannot elect someone. We cannot choose a nominee. Let me put it that way. That is going to blur the lines between this president and our nominee. It has to be someone who has a very stark difference between the President of the United States and our nominee, and I will suggest to you I'm that person. Two more questions, he said.
All right. The governor says he's willing to take 2 more questions before he gets on the plane to go back to Texas.
Right there.
Sir in the yellow.
Let her rip.
Yes, I would like to know, what can we do as a nation and Washington about getting God back in our schools?
One of the things I think it's important is to have someone asked me, said, how are you going to reflect your Christian values from the White House? And I shared with them a number of ways. My wife and I were on the stage together. And I talked about a number of ways, one being that not only am I going to be proud to sign a document declaring a National Day of Prayer, I'll actually be there. And I talked about a couple of other issues, and my wife said, "Can I have the microphone?" And my wife's awesome. I can't wait for y'all to meet her, and it's because she boils it down so succinctly. And she took the microphone. She said, "Let me share with you one thing. On Sunday morning, you won't see my husband playing golf. He'll be at church."
Hello, Governor. I appreciate the fact that you said that people that are collecting Social Security now won't be affected by any changes. But the fact of the matter is that the Federal Reserve, with both Greenspan and Bernanke, have caused a drop in the dollar of 17% since June of last year, and of 37% in the past 10 years. So if we're on a fixed Social Security payment, and everybody knows that they don't reflect inflation in that number. They don't include food and energy, which is what we consume. How can we possibly put a stop to this radical Keynesian policy of Ben Bernanke?
Thank you. Well, the first thing you do, we have to have a Federal Reserve that is transparent. People need to understand what's going on at the Federal Reserve, and we do not need a Fed chair or a Federal Reserve who are making monetary policy to cover up bad fiscal policy by an administration. And so to address the two issues of food and energy, one of the ways that you can bring down the cost of energy, which affects everything that we do, including the cost of food, is to expand our domestic production of energy. I mean, I happen to think that with the amounts of natural gas that we have, with the other energy sources that we can have in this country, that not only can we drive down the cost of energy, but you can drive down the cost of food and the other commodity prices that we have today. But you've got to have it all goes back to don't spend all the money, Tim. I mean, it all goes back to don't spend all the money and freeing up the entrepreneurs, whether they're on Wall Street, big businesses, or whether they're the small mom and pops, from overtaxation, over-regulation, over-litigation. You're going to get tired of hearing me say it, but we're going to say it until we get it in place. Last question, right back there. I'm sorry I kind of took over your role. I apologize, brother.
I'm a fellow Texan, and I want to know, you're about to make your national debut in a debate on the most anti-Republican in D.C. there is. I want you to just please be prepared for the most personal, gotcha.
I think I'm already prepared for that, sir.
I'm coming after you with everything they got.
Yes, sir.
They see who you are and how great you are. Please be prepared.
Yes, sir. Right.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for your candor. I'm a 84-year-old, 100% disabled veteran, 30% PTSD in 2 wars. I ran the Iran rescue effort, for your information. The C-130 is a great airplane, no doubt about it. Now, clearly you are a different kind of Texan. We had Lyndon Johnson and 2 Bushes, and we don't need no more of them. We need you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your candor.
Now, has Governor Perry answered our questions? Yeah. Let's give him a hand. Absolutely. All right, Governor, you want to wrap us up? Let's hear from the governor one more time. Let him wrap it up for us.
Just stay standing up, because I'm not going to take that long. Listen, I love this country. I think our best days are ahead of us. I think the greatest stories in the annals of America are still in front of us. But they'll only occur if we are willing to do over the next 14 months what's going to be required. And it's going to be a hard slog. But let me tell you, I think this country's worth sacrificing for. I think it's worth doing those things that I shared with you, whether it's about, just sharing your name and going door to door, or whether it's giving your time and your treasure. But I want to ask you for your support. It's what I came here for today, is to share a little bit about my heart, a little bit about where I came from, and together where we're going. And I want to say thank you, God bless you, and through you, may God continue to bless this great country of America. Thank you.